People, what's a lie you have told that has gotten so ridiculously out of hand that you've had to keep building on it and is now a part of your life? I almost got 2 women fired from the post office to cover up the fact that I bought a flashlight. When I was 15, I bought a flashlight, the other kind of flashlight. What can I say? I was a horny guy, and after discovering them online, I knew I needed one. 2 small problems. 1, I wasn't of age to buy one. But I wasn't too worried about that. 2 is I didn't have a job. Any money I got was from my parents, and I maybe had like $40 in my bank account. At the time, a singular flashlight was $80, I think. Plus shipping brought it to over $100. I forget how much it was in total, but since I'm in Canada, cross-border fees raised the cost even more. Basically, I sold a bunch of my video games to raise the proper amount, and since I was 15 and didn't have a credit card to process the payment, my plan was to get a money order, since Flashlight accepted them, and to pay for it by debit, and my bank sends statements to my house once every month. So, my plan was to get to that bank statement before my parents did. I usually got it before them anyways, since I always checked the mail. As long as they didn't see it, then everything would go off without a hitch. Well, something always goes wrong, right? I go to the post office, place my money order, tell the lovely older ladies behind the post office counter that I'm buying an anniversary gift for my parents as a cover-up. They think it's lovely. Perfect, and I leave. Flashlight received my money order and dispatched my shipment. It was all getting real now. All that's left is to check the mail every day and hide my bank statement from my parents and get my shipment while they're at work. I check the mail every day. No bank statement. Well, I didn't check the mail one day, and wouldn't you know it, that's the day my bank statement came in the mail, and yeah, my parents got to my bank statement before me. So, my parents saw I had a $100+ transaction at the local pharmacy/post office and asked me that night what that was for. I didn't prepare any sort of lie in case they saw my bank statement, since I was so sure I'd get to it before they did. So, on the spot, the only lie that made sense was, oh, I bought $15 worth of candy at the store. Maybe the cashier hit 1 twice by accident, and it came out to 115? Whatever. I don't care. God, I was a frigging idiot. Long story short, my parents basically went on a CSI investigation. My dad called the store, asked to speak to the manager and the ladies who processed my payment and scammed my son. They traced back the payments and saw the one in question. The manager spoke to the ladies, and they said they didn't do anything wrong, which they obviously didn't. My parents asked me if I was telling the truth before proceeding further. I still stuck to my original story since I wasn't about to tell them I bought a frigging flashlight, and I begged them to drop it in the chillest way. Nope. My dad continued to pursue whatever happened, and it got to the point that my dad was going to go meet with the manager and the post office ladies, and basically these ladies were at risk of getting fired. I guess my dad and the manager of the store believed me. Finally, after hearing they could lose their job, I fessed up and told my parents I bought a microphone repair kit for my Nintendo DS, but didn't want to tell them since they'd tell me I was wasting my money. They finally dropped it. But as it turns out, they did actually find out what I bought. So that was embarrassing. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. When I was younger, I was walking home at night and the streetlights were off. I got scared and started running, and knocked myself clean out on a lamppost. Someone walking their dog found me and called the ambulance. I was so embarrassed when I woke up that I told the nurse I was mugged. I was 12. My parents turned up at the same time as the police. I gave a description that sounded a lot like Gonzo from the Muppets, and police were searching the area with sniffer dogs. Thank Christ nobody was arrested, and I still haven't told my parents. Story 3. I feel personally attacked by this question. There was a woman at work I just could not stand. I really tried to tolerate her, but she had a habit of saying incredibly mean things. I knew it stemmed from growing up with a hypercritical mother, but that didn't make it any easier to deal with. My solution? Minimize my time around her. As long as I kept my distance, I could remain civil. Then came the work Christmas party. She gleefully informed me that she had nominated me for the planning committee and that I had been voted in, without my presence or consent. My brain short-circuited, and before I knew it, I blurted out a semi-reasonable lie. Oh, I'm actually Jewish. I don't really feel comfortable planning or attending a Christmas party. I thought I was brilliant. I live in an area with a small Jewish population, so if she ever asked follow-up questions, I figured I could just fake my way through it. Unfortunately, she took this as her personal mission to champion inclusivity. The Christmas party was rebranded as a holiday party. Pork products were banned. She proudly announced to the office that I was Jewish and that everyone needed to be respectful of my beliefs. The kicker? She ordered donuts for the team, but made sure to hide the bacon maple bars so I wouldn't be offended. So now, not only was I stuck going to a party I never wanted to be part of, but I had to suffer through it without bacon. I eventually left that job, but my Jewish identity followed me. At this point, I've given up and just lean into it. To the Jewish community, my sincerest apologies. Story 4. Our daughter was accidentally conceived during a 3-score when our friend's birth control failed. Rather than explaining the full story, we just told everyone that we used a surrogate because my wife wanted to focus on her career. What no one knows is that our friend didn't want to get an abortion, so my wife and I chose to take the baby in and raise her as our own. Honestly, it worked out better than we could have expected. Over the past 4 years, my wife has been promoted and is making serious money while I stay home with our daughter. Every now and then, she jokes that she accidentally had her cake and ate it too. She got to become a mom without going through pregnancy, and her career and body stayed exactly the way she wanted. Story 5. I made up a story about getting stabbed in high school, and it completely spiraled out of control. Cops got involved. I had to go to court. Not my best moment. Here's the full story. Back in high school, I worked at a movie theater. During winter break of my senior year, I had my wisdom teeth removed. During the procedure, the surgeon's tool slipped and cut through my cheek, inside and out. They stitched me up, and that was that. No big deal. A few days later, I went back to school. In my first class, the teacher asked if anyone had good stories from break. She started with me because she noticed the stitches on my face. Honestly, I had forgotten about them, and in a split-second decision, I blurted out that I had been stabbed behind the movie theater after closing one night. I fully expected someone to call me out, and I would have just laughed it off and told the truth. But no one did. So, I kept the lie going. By the end of the day, the entire school thought I got stabbed. Fast forward to Friday. I show up at work, and there are signs everywhere warning employees not to go outside alone and to be on the lookout for the guy who stabbed me. That's when I realized this might have gotten a little out of hand. Then my general manager called the police to file a report. Now I'm sitting there, face to face with an officer, doubling down on the lie, making up details about where it happened, what the guy looked like, how big the knife was. After about an hour of straight-up lying, I finally admitted things had gotten out of control. The officer was not amused. He told my general manager the truth, and I got suspended for 2 weeks. I also had to go to court for lying to a police officer. Surprisingly, I didn't lose my job, and most people just laughed it off once they found out. Story 6. When I was 11, I broke a vase. Not just any vase. This was a family heirloom that had been passed down for generations. I knew that if anyone found out, I'd be in serious trouble. This wasn't the kind of accident my family would just shrug off. The vase was valuable, and breaking it was practically a crime in our house. Panicking, I did the only thing my terrified kid brain could come up with. I got rid of the evidence. I snuck the broken pieces into our neighbor's trash bin and decided to cover my tracks with a fake burglary. I left the front door open, rummaged through some drawers, and even cracked open my mom's jewelry box to make it look convincing. Then I waited. The anxiety was unreal. My heart was pounding out of my chest by the time my parents got home and discovered the break-in. I pretended to be asleep, hoping to avoid suspicion, but it wasn't long before they barged into my room, demanding to know what happened. I stuck to my story. I didn't know anything, I was tired, and I just wanted to go back to sleep. Then they called the police. The officers took it seriously and checked our neighbor's security cameras. And that's when everything fell apart. The footage showed me sneaking through their yard, carrying the vase straight to their trash cans. My dad was furious. No amount of backtracking could save me. He took me out behind the house. And let's just say, I learned that day what it felt like to get absolutely whacked by a lamp. Story 7. When I was 10, I discovered I could make myself throw up, so I used it as an excuse to skip school for about 2 weeks. My parents were completely baffled since I didn't have a fever or any other symptoms. My aunt suggested that I might be allergic to red food dye because her grandson, my second cousin, was, and I just went along with it. For years, my house never had red Gatorade strawberry Pop-Tarts or anything else with red dye. When I turned 20, I finally admitted to my parents that I had been faking it. They were not amused. Story 8. I've always been the kind of person who leaves my shoes tied and just slips them on. A few months into dating this girl, one of my shoes came untied, but I was too lazy to fix it. It really bothered her, and she kept insisting that I tie it. For some reason, I just refused to bend down and do it. At the time, there was a story about Liam Neeson getting his shoe tied by Olivia Wilde, and I was insanely jealous because I'd had a crush on Olivia Wilde since House. Eventually, my girlfriend asked, "Do you even know how to tie your shoes?" And in my head, all I could see was Liam Neeson getting his shoes tied like a total badass. So, I just blurted out, "No, I never learned how. You can't tell anyone." To this day, whenever my shoe comes untied in public, she pulls me aside, away from people, and secretly ties it for me. For some reason, it makes her happy, and it's honestly the sweetest thing ever. I have no idea how she puts up with a grown man who supposedly doesn't know how to tie his own shoes, but I'll never be as cool as Liam Neeson. At least I found my Olivia Wilde. Story 9. In my junior year of college, a friend asked what my spring break plans were. I told her I was going to Mexico. I had a bit of a reputation for harmless fibbing, so she was a little skeptical. I guess my tone didn't quite convince her. Now, I was actually going to Mexico with a mutual friend and his family, but I saw an opportunity to have some fun. For the next several minutes, I pretended to be a terrible liar about going to Mexico, playing up the fact that I was probably just making it up. She eventually walked away, convinced that I was lying. Later that night, while hanging out with my mutual friend, she came up to ask if we were really, truly going to Mexico together. My friend immediately picked up on what I was doing, acted confused, and assured her he was just going with his family. By this point, she was sure I was lying. I kept up the act for the next few days leading up to spring break, pretending to be a terrible liar while always telling her the truth. I sent out an email to some of our other mutual friends saying, "If friend asks what I'm doing over spring break, tell her I'm going to Mexico," hoping one of them would betray me and spill the beans, which of course happened. Once in Mexico, my buddy and I sent her a bunch of pictures, all of which looked nothing like Mexico. There was one of me in the kitchenette of our hotel room, wearing a bathing suit and a button-up shirt, with my backpack clearly visible in the background. Another was of both of us in the ocean, taken from so far away that you couldn't even tell it was us. The photos were all deliberately made to look like we weren't even trying to keep up the ruse. When we got back, we each answered a series of specific questions about our trip, like what we had for lunch on the second day. We got most of the answers right, but there were a few slip-ups. After weeks of confusion, she finally concluded that we must have watched some vacation movie and were just repeating facts from it. Now it's been 2 years, and I'm stuck in this lie. I've tried to come clean by telling her the truth. But the thing is, I've been telling her the truth this whole time. At this point, I've accepted that no matter what I say, she'll always be about 90% sure we never went to Mexico. Story 10. Downloaded something with my phone number. Phone bill came in much higher. I lied about downloading anything, and my dad fought hard to get the bill canceled. As a typical 16-year-old, I wanted to join my friends in playing multiplayer games online. All of them had Windows PCs, while I had a Mac, since my parents got a new one and passed me the old one. If you know anything about Macs back then, you'll know that most games wouldn't run on them. After some digging, I found a website that claimed it could make Windows games work on Macs. All I had to do was enter my name, phone number, and confirm it with a text. I was really naive back then. I got the SMS, replied with yes, and the download began on my Mac. Once the file was downloaded and I opened it, I found that it was just Rick Astley's "Never Gonna Give You Up." I'd been rickrolled, but I shrugged it off and moved on. Fast forward 3 weeks, and my monthly phone bill arrived. My dad opened it and found a bill for $150, way more than the usual $20. Turns out, they had been charging me about $40 a week. When I got home, my dad was standing in the doorway looking furious. He asked me if I had downloaded anything online, and I panicked and said no. He then asked if I had downloaded any porn, saying I should be honest, so he knew what caused the high bill. Again, I denied it. He found out which company was behind the charges and contacted them, asking about the $130 charge. They told him it was legitimate and confirmed it had been authorized. My dad didn't back down. He hired an attorney and demanded the company remove the charge, believing me when I said I hadn't downloaded anything. The company refused to withdraw the bill, and after 3 weeks of calls and emails, they finally gave up and canceled the charge. Since then, I've been way more careful about where I share my information online, and I'll never make that mistake again. Big props to my dad for being awesome and fighting to get the bill removed. Story 11. A girl I lived with 2 years ago thought I was stealing her yogurt out of the fridge. I told her it couldn't have been me since I'm allergic to dairy, and now I still can't eat dairy in front of her or anyone from that friend group. She made me a dairy-free cake for my birthday. The guilt is eating me alive. Edit. Yeah, I ate the frigging yogurt, and it was delicious. Also, I'm not a guy. Story 12. When I was 13, I was playing World of Warcraft when someone asked my age. 13 felt way too young, so I lied and said I was 14, because obviously, that made me way more mature. I kept playing with the same group for years, and by the time I was actually 17, they all thought I was 18. One day, someone asked how my college applications were going. Realizing I'd been caught in my own lie, I just rolled with it and asked for advice. I followed their suggestions, which led to me actually applying to a university. And somehow I got accepted, as a high school junior. At that point, I had to commit to the bit. To make my fake age real, I overloaded my spring semester with online classes, shout out to Florida Virtual School, and managed to graduate a year early. Then, I actually went to the university that accepted me, because keeping up the lie had now become my entire academic career. So here I am, 1,000 miles from home, finished my BS, and now working on my master's degree. All because 14 sounded so much more mature than 13 in a damn video game. Story 13. This is a lie with a happy ending, and I'll take it to my grave. Mom prayed for help funding a trip with her kids. She thinks he delivered. My mother is an incredibly emotional person, but with 5 boys in the family, she doesn't get a lot of sentimental moments with us. Most of the time, we just joke around and move on. She has cried at every big, medium, and minor event in our lives, and honestly, I love that about her. She cares deeply for me and my siblings, even if we give her a hard time for it. I was a little jerk growing up, but I'm actively trying to make up for all the patience my parents had with me. My parents, now almost empty nesters, live in Colorado. By complete coincidence, all of their kids ended up in Utah County for work or school. We live within 20 minutes of each other, purely by chance. Last year, my mom decided she wanted to take us on one last road trip together. So, we flew to Colorado, and she drove us back home. It might not sound like a big deal, but my family doesn't have much money, and this trip, stopping at places we used to visit, like the Little America Hotel in Wyoming and the Grand America Brunch Buffet, was a huge gesture from her. The problem? My parents couldn't afford it. So, I took matters into my own hands. At every stop, I discreetly covered the costs, calling ahead to pay for rooms, sneaking away during meals to use the bathroom while slipping my card to a waiter. The staff even played along, making up stories about room upgrades or anonymous strangers paying for our meals. My family was blown away by the kindness of these so-called Good Samaritans of the Midwest. But my mom? She was moved. She broke down in tears, confessing to me that she had no idea how she was going to afford this trip. She did it anyway, because she just wanted to be with her boys one last time before we got too busy, or she got too old. Then, she told me she had prayed for help, and God answered. I'm not religious, but my mom is, and there's no way in hell I'm going to tell her that the most spiritual experience she's had in years was just her sneaky son working behind the scenes. Love you, Mama. Moral of the story, be good to your parents. It's worth it. Story 14. I had a coworker tell me he got married on accident. It was Christmas morning, and he bought his girlfriend a ring as a Christmas present. They were both sitting around the tree, and when she opened it, she started to cry and said, "Well, are you going to ask me?" That's when he realized what he had done. He got down on one knee and asked her to marry him. Moral of the story, don't ever buy a ring for a girl unless you are planning on marrying her. Story 15. When I was younger, I had some crazy growth spurts that caused intense stretch marks on my back. As a late middle schooler/early high schooler who was involved in pretty much every sport, my teammates and coaches often saw my scars in the showers and would ask about them, wondering if I had been abused. Now, just to set the scene, I grew up in a small town in the Midwest with less than 2,000 people. So everyone knew everyone, and being one of my dad's 4 kids, We were all sarcastic and didn't take things too seriously. So when they asked about my stretch marks, I jokingly said, "I can't talk about it, or else my dad will smack me up again." Most of the guys in the locker room knew me well and got the joke. They had been to my house for birthday parties and knew my dad was a great guy who really cared about us. But my coach, who had a relationship with the school counselor, didn't quite get the humor. Apparently, something was said because a few days later, my dad noticed CPS dropping by our place randomly, a few times, no less. Our farm is in the middle of nowhere, down a mile-long driveway, so it was pretty strange. After the third visit, my dad called the school and arranged a meeting with the counselor and CPS. During that meeting, my dad found out that not only me, but all 4 of his kids had been interviewed by CPS, without his knowledge, and all of us had made the same joke. "I can't talk about it, or my dad will find out." He was furious at us for making the joke, and even more upset at the school for handling it so poorly. After about 3 months of phone calls, talking with my counselor, and multiple meetings with the CPS worker, the school district concluded that people who grow quickly tend to get stretch marks. Story 16. I dislocated my knee dancing like a maniac whilst drunk in January. Ended up on crutches for 3 weeks. Told everyone at work I did it bending down to grab something from the freezer because I didn't want them to think I was a drunken maniac. People at work are still shocked that I dislocated it so easily and keep saying how unlucky I am and bringing the sympathy. Now I just feel like a fraud. Story 17. Pretty silly, but I think it fits the bill. When I was about 5, I remember being in the bathroom and brushing my teeth. My mom was there and berated me for something. Later, being a sensitive child, I was crying in bed about it. My parents came in all concerned and my mom asked, "Was it because I yelled at you earlier?" Embarrassed at being caught out so easily, I said no. I'm sad because I can't swim. Soon after, I was taken to swimming lessons. I hated swimming. Story 18. A couple years ago, I went to a bar in a town I didn't expect to be in very often, and I decided to don a Scottish accent and make up a backstory for a fictitious version of myself. Now, I doubt my accent would have fooled someone actually from Edinburgh, but by the end of the night, I had a group of Americans and one bemused Australian chatting with me about the things that make the US a strange place to visit from abroad. Shots were bought, back slaps given, and a good night had. I thought nothing else of it. Until I was dating a girl from the next town over, and she took me to her favorite bar. That bar. We walked in, someone greeted me by my name, and I did the only thing I could do. Cheerfully donned my fraudulent accent, explained that my business trip had been indefinitely extended, and spent the next 20 minutes furtively explaining to my date that I wasn't a con man, just an ex-actor with terrible impulse control. Story 19. When I was a little kid, I told my mom I really liked her tuna casserole. I was just trying to be nice and pay her a compliment since she seemed like she was having a bad day. Pretty much every time I go to visit her, she has some tuna casserole waiting for me. I don't actually like tuna casserole that much, but it's such a sweet gesture that I don't have the heart to tell her to stop. This has been going on for over 30 years now. Story 20. I once told people I had been bitten by a venomous snake to get out of work for a few days. I had already called in sick a ton of times and just could not face them if I did it again. I am young and in good health. There is just no way even an old frail person is ill as much as I am calling in. So yes, snake bite. They knew I kept venomous, and I thought, this is a great idea. Turns out they were fascinated and wanted to see, so I had to wrap my foot up in a huge bandage and hobble around for weeks. Luckily, I was moving to another job. I actually didn't hate a few weeks after that. I didn't have to deform my own foot, or actually let one of my venomous bite me so that I would not get busted. I was not far off doing so. Story 21. I actually did get married by accident. Well, the marriage was intentional. The wedding was the surprise. I proposed to the most badass, incredible woman I've ever met. A few months later, I realized I hated my career and wanted to go back to school. We talked it over, and she was completely on board with supporting us while I made the change. Up until that point, my son and I had insurance through my job, and she and her son were covered through hers. She called her provider to see if she could add us to her policy since we had been living together for over a year. They assured her that, yes, we could be put on her insurance without being married. We just had to go down to the courthouse and fill out an affidavit confirming we lived together. Simple enough, right? She jotted down the name of the form, and we headed to the courthouse thinking it was no big deal. We sat down with a nice lady who took our IDs and started entering our information. She made small talk, asked how we met, kindergarten for the record, and other random things. She printed out the form, we started signing in a few different places, and halfway through, she suddenly stopped and said, "Y'all do know that once this form is signed, y'all are legally married in the state of Texas, right?" We froze, looked at each other, looked at her, looked at each other again. She went on to explain that once we signed, if we ever wanted to split up, we'd have to legally get divorced. Neither of us could marry anyone else unless official divorce papers were filed. We had been planning to get married anyway. My son and I needed health insurance, and we were already halfway through the process, so screw it. We just went with it. Then, out of nowhere, this lady had us raise our right hands, swear on something, and proceeded to give the most heartfelt mini-wedding speech I've ever heard. She went on about how we were destined to be together since that first day in kindergarten, how fate had brought us back into each other's lives, and how she had just witnessed true love unfold before her eyes. Honestly, 10 out of 10. I'd accidentally marry my wife again in a heartbeat. Story 22. Back in college in the early 80s, my now wife and I were dating when we went to a party where she got completely blacked out. The next morning, I told her that a little organ grinder monkey had given her titty twisters. She didn't believe me at first, so she asked my roommate, who, without missing a beat, confirmed the story and even added a few extra details for good measure. It was all 100% BS. No mischievous monkey ever existed. Fast forward 30-plus years, and it has become a full-fledged family legend. She tells the story at every gathering, and everyone, parents, siblings, kids, friends, has heard it dozens of times. When new people hear it for the first time, they howl with laughter because by now, she has perfected the delivery. Those who've heard it before, they just roll their eyes and brace themselves. The kicker? I'm the only one left who knows it's all a lie. My old roommate, the only other accomplice, disappeared from my life decades ago. I'm too scared to tell her the truth now, so I wrote a sealed letter and put it in my will. She'll find out, eventually. Story 23. When I was a kid and playing on Xbox Live with people from all over the world, I used to put on this Dutch-sounding accent when talking to new people, partly because I didn't like how my normal accent sounded, especially when hearing it back, and also because I was slash and weird. I met some good friends throughout the year, or so that I did it. I'm still in touch, but nowhere near as much as we used to be. We'll have a Skype call every now and again, and even after 6 to 7 years, I still put the accent onto them. Obviously, with us being good friends, I also lied about an awful lot of background things. It's like I created this other person. I never intended for it to go like this, but I could never tell them I've lied about my accent, which stemmed into a bunch of other things. And even now, after all these years, I'm the Dutch guy that has only ever spoke English. It goes much deeper, but that's basically it. Story 24. When I first started dating my wife, I casually told her that I wasn't into corn. Fast forward 6 years, we're married, sitting on the couch watching Friends. In the episode, one of the characters insists her boyfriend doesn't like corn. My wife turns to me and says, "See? Not all guys like corn. You don't like it, right?" I said, "That's right, honey. It's just not for me." Update, the truth finally came out. She's totally cool with it. Turns out she's only seen corn a couple of times, but said she'd be down to watch it together sometime. So win-win? Story 25. During my first year of college, one of my roommates had a girl over, and we were all chatting when she asked about my ethnicity. On a whim, assuming I'd never see her again, I casually told her I was Samoan. No real reason, just a random answer inspired by Dr. Gonzo from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The conversation moved on, and I forgot about it. Fast forward a few years. Another roommate, who had taken a job with the U.S. Census, was handing out forms and helping us fill them out. I was debating which ethnicity box to check when, suddenly, a chorus of my friends chimed in. American Samoan, obviously. Turns out, that girl from freshman year had become part of my close friend group and had told everyone I was Samoan. Thus began an elaborate, years-long inside joke where I doubled down on my Samoan heritage. I developed an entire backstory, how my parents met, what my childhood in Samoa was like, everything. I'd sprinkle in absurdly fake Samoan phrases, which were just Jabba the Hutt quotes with the word solo solo, a real Samoan village, thrown in. Someone once asked me to sing a song in Samoan, so I confidently belted out a phonetic butchering of a song I only vaguely remembered in Welsh, which, I'm fairly certain, sounded nothing like actual Samoan music. Now, I went to a school known for being full of highly intelligent people, so my favorite part was how rarely anyone questioned me. I'd spin a completely ridiculous story about life in Samoa, and instead of challenging it, people would nod sagely and say, I was just reading about that. I only got called out maybe one time in 10. Fast forward again, years later. I've graduated, moved to a new city, and started dating this amazing woman. Through a weird twist of fate, she shares an office with an old friend of mine from a summer internship. She starts asking him about me, and naturally, he tells her all about my rich Samoan heritage. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a completely random, forgettable joke to a stranger during my freshman year led to my wife genuinely believing, for the first 6 months of our relationship, that I was Samoan. Story 26. Back in school, I had a massive crush on this girl, an easy 9 out of 10, who was so far out of my league that I never thought I had a chance. But then one fateful day, the impossible happened. I got to talk to her one-on-one. And to my, and everyone else's, surprise, the conversation actually flowed really well. There was just one problem. I wasn't good-looking, popular, or any of the things my 16-year-old, pimple-faced, scrawny self thought I needed to be. So, naturally, I decided I needed something interesting to keep this girl's attention. And what did my brilliant teenage brain come up with? I told her I was a DJ. Not just any DJ. I claimed I made electronic music myself. Lo and behold, it worked. She was fascinated. And when I showed her a random track I'd grabbed off the internet, she actually believed me. In fact, she was so into it that we started talking every day. At first about music, then about everything else. I had somehow pulled off the ultimate nerd fantasy and landed a relationship with her. But of course, there was no time to celebrate because now I had to maintain the lie. So, I started looking up fancy-sounding music, terms to throw into conversations. I even downloaded a pirated version of some random music software just to keep up appearances. The lie spiraled so hard that I had to fake an entire producer persona. And here's where it gets crazy. Somewhere along the way, I actually started making my own music. Like for real. Fast forward to today, and I have my own little studio, still using the same DAW, this time legally bought, and even play DJ gigs from time to time. So yeah, what started as a dumb teenage lie to impress a girl somehow turned into an actual career. Story 27. I made a joke about my stretch marks being from abuse, and it turned into a full-blown ordeal. I've had a friend since I was about 12 that my mom's always hated. No real reason, just that she'd get a bad vibe from him, even though he's honestly one of the nicest people I know. Eventually, my mom forbade me from hanging out with him, which sucked, but he ended up moving to a different school and town anyway, so it wasn't like we had much of a choice. When he got his license, he started asking to hang out again. But of course, I couldn't let my mom know, so I came up with a fake friend named Eric and told her I was hanging out with him instead. He was totally fine with it since he knew my mom didn't like him. At one point, Eric wanted to move back to our town, and I wanted to move out with him. Naturally, I couldn't tell my mom who Eric really was or that I was planning to live with him. For months, we looked for a place we could afford and that was close to our jobs, and we finally found one. During this time, my mom got really sick and was either in the hospital or bedridden at home, so she never had the chance to come see our new place or meet Eric. Whenever I video called her, I made sure to never get him on camera. She passed away without ever knowing the truth. While I hate that I had to lie to her for so long about something so big, it was honestly easier that way, and in the end, it felt like it was for the best. Story 28. I made up a ridiculous story about a brother I didn't have, and everyone believed it. At the start of 4th grade, I told my friends I had a 16-year-old brother named Rob. I made it up because one of my friends had a huge brother who was 7 feet 4 inches tall, and when I met him, he was seriously towering over everyone. My friend talked about him like he was a celebrity, so I figured I'd join in on the fun. I started bragging about my brother, and every time they came over, they'd ask to meet him. I had built him up so much that they were really curious. As our group grew, more and more people heard about Rob. At this point, I didn't even try to make it sound believable. I was just having a blast with it. I told everyone that Rob was the president of a small country, friends with Obama and the Queen of England, lived in a billion-dollar mansion, had a pet wolf, a wife, and 2 kids. Oh, and he was in movies and TV shows and knew a ton of celebrities. People were totally obsessed with Rob, and they started telling their parents. The parents, of course, called mine to verify, and my parents, not really paying attention to what they were asking, just said, "Yeah," and hung up. I'm sure some of the parents were skeptical, but none of them said anything to their kids. Word spread so fast that even first graders came up to me saying, "Hey, you're the kid with the cool brother." Before long, everyone in 4th grade and below knew about Rob. I was basically famous. But then summer came, and by 5th grade, it was all forgotten, and everything went back to normal. I think people just moved on and forgot about it, but I still chuckle about it. I know it might seem crazy that they believed it, but remember, these were the same kids who believed that if they closed their eyes at summer camp, they'd go to a magic world. But that's a story for another time. Story 29. I used to lie about my mother's health and tell people I was doing enough to take care of her. She was dealing with early-onset dementia, and while she could still feed herself if there was food available and could hold up most of her conversations, it was clear something was off. I chose to ignore it for years, visiting her less and less. If anyone asked, I'd say she was doing okay. She used to do freelance work, but that dried up as her dementia progressed and her colleagues retired. Then her best friend passed away from cancer, and her brother moved away. I was her only child, and she was alone. The first sign of real trouble came when she got into a car accident. She wasn't injured, but she wrecked a statue. We did the bare minimum to help, trying to prevent her from renewing her driver's license because she couldn't understand that driving was no longer safe for her. After that, she stopped going to the grocery store, stopped taking showers, and didn't even take out the trash. My lie to myself became that visiting her once a week for burgers and grocery shopping was doing all I could to help. Only my wife knew just how bad things were. After every visit, I'd sit in my car and cry for a while. That emotion hit me unexpectedly. At work, while driving, during holidays. I became a wreck emotionally. I lost my job, probably because of my short temper and my disillusionment with the importance of work. I also withdrew emotionally from my family. Then my mom called the cops on herself and ended up in the ER. The hospital had her for hours before they called me. By then, she couldn't hold coherent conversations, was hallucinating about shadowy figures flying around, and could barely sleep. That's when the lie came crashing down. It took almost a year to get her into a facility we could afford. She's in a better place now, and I'm processing my emotions through therapy, feeling like I'm slowly getting better too. But part of me wishes I could hold on to that lie, to believe that the mom I used to talk to about anything was still there. Story 30. 7 years ago, my fiancé and I were packing up our apartment to move into a townhouse. The plan was to get married the following year. One day, we had a huge argument over something stupid, and I decided to leave to avoid escalating things further. At the time, our 3-year-old daughter was in the apartment. I stepped out, walked down the hall, and in the heat of the moment, I punched the wall. Unbeknownst to me, I hit the stud in the wall and instantly broke my dominant right hand. It hurt like hell, but I didn't think much of it at first. I went to my parents' house, and my younger brother, who's an EMT, confirmed that I'd broken my hand. I called my fiancé to explain what happened. We had a good relationship with my in-laws, but telling them I broke my hand because of a silly argument wasn't something we wanted to share. So we lied. We told them my friend accidentally slammed the trunk of the car on my hand after a round of golf. The lie stuck, and to this day, I still golf with that reckless and oblivious friend who didn't see my hand in the trunk. Whenever I mention golfing with him in front of my in-laws, they joke about me keeping my hand out of the trunk. They even go as far as moving my hand out of the way when someone is closing a door or cabinet, as if my hand is somehow doomed to get caught in everything. The truth is still a secret, and it's getting harder to keep up the lie. I'm afraid one day I'll slip up and tell them the truth, or worse, they'll find this post and expose the lie I've been holding onto for 7 years. Story 31. Not me, but my father told a fantastic lie to get a job. He was born in the UK and emigrated to Canada in the late 1970s. He had just left Africa and was looking for a stopgap job that'd keep him out of the poorhouse for a few years before making his way south to Texas for work in a better climate. Being young and single in those days meant he was essentially barred from all union jobs, which in those days and in my hometown were the best you could hope to get. He worked at a foundry for a few months and managed to get an interview with the union. They asked him about normal stuff like education and training, but then they asked about family. He told them he'd come to the country and fell in love with a local woman. They were engaged, and his goal was to work and save money to get her a ring and a decent wedding. He really sold it. Told them about her family, her siblings, where they were thinking of getting married, the whole 9 yards. He got the job. Fast forward a few months, and as he's training, he ends up face to face with some of the managers who'd interviewed him. They remembered him and asked how the wedding plans were going, how was the bride-to-be, etc. He told me his face went pale, and he started babbling about how she was taking over the whole thing, shutting him out, and racking up the costs. Apparently, all the managers nodded in agreement and moved on. Then every few months, the same managers would see him and ask for updates. He kept the charade going to the point where he'd have to get married, or he'd be found out and possibly fired, even deported. So he doubled down. The next time they asked, he paused and flatly told them she had dumped him for not making enough money. The managers, I was told, were furious at her. They told him not all Canadians were like that, and that he'd find a nice girl, and that if he wanted to talk they'd buy him a beer at the pub after work. A couple of years later, someone asked about his ex-fiancée. He made up the worst lie on the spot. She met some asshole lawyer and moved away. Nobody wanted to ask him about women ever again. Kept his job for 35 years. Story 32. My wife thinks I have a child out there somewhere. I don't. Here's the short version. When I was 16, my girlfriend got pregnant. It was a huge emotional roller coaster, and things didn't end well. Eventually, I was told she'd been cheating on me, and another guy was likely the father. That was confirmed after the baby was born. I haven't spoken to her since I was 17, and I'm now 39. Fast forward a few years. I was hanging out with a cute girl, half drunk and half stoned, trading sob stories about our crappy lives. I started talking about my ex and how she had gotten pregnant while cheating on me. To spice things up, I made up a story about how a paternity test confirmed the baby was mine, that she ran off to live with the baby back east, and I had no idea where my daughter was or how she was doing. The story got me sympathy and ultimately got me laid, mission accomplished. 3 years later, I married that girl. We've been married for 13 years now and have 2 kids together. She still believes I have a third child out there somewhere, and that one day a young woman will show up at our door looking for her long-lost dad. It gets worse. My wife, wanting to be honest with our kids, told them they have an older sister they might meet one day. My young son told my mom, and predictably, she went ballistic. My parents knew about the pregnancy and had even hired a lawyer when the baby was born. They knew about the paternity test, but they'd never actually seen the results. I had received the confirmation myself, and when I told them the test showed I wasn't the father, they never questioned it. Now, stuck between my wife and my mom, I lied to my mom. I told her the test was negative, but that the test had been done on the other guy, and it turned out he wasn't the father either. It was me. I told her I'd lied before because I was just a scared kid, and when she disappeared, I thought it would all just go away. Of course, my mom wanted to hire a private investigator to track my ex down. She had all the legal papers with identifying info. I had to talk her out of it, getting forceful and telling her she had no right to dig into my past like that. Eventually, she backed off. So now, my wife thinks I have a long-lost child, my mom thinks she has a lost grandchild, and half my family thinks I'm a terrible father for not searching for my child, for lying to my parents, and for not being a father about it. I'm stuck in this mess, and it feels like it'll never end. Story 33. I'm a guy who pretended to be a girl in an MMO for a few years and eventually came clean. I spent a lot of time pretending to be a girl in an online MMO and made a lot of friends. It all started as an experiment. I had heard that girls get treated differently in games, so I wanted to test it out. I always roll female characters anyway, so when guys would inevitably ask if I was a guy or a girl, I'd just say I was a girl. Strangely, girls rarely asked about my real-life gender. This went on for quite a while, and the guys would start flirting with me, which I thought was funny. I'm not gay, just not insecure. I played the hard-to-get girl who wasn't interested in that way. Guys would give me free items and gold all the time, and I even joined an all-girls guild. Of course, people eventually wanted to hear my voice and prove I was female. I made up this elaborate story about being mute due to throat cancer. Some people saw right through it, but most believed it, and the lie kept going. I even posted a random photo of a girl and claimed it was me. Eventually, I came clean on the forums, and you would have thought the world was ending. I became the biggest troll on the server, though I wasn't trying to troll anyone. It just happened. Story 34. This isn't my story, but I wanted to share it here because it fits this thread, even though it'll probably get buried. But whatever. I've had a pretty rough time with love. I've been engaged 4 times and married 3. One of those marriages ended in divorce, another was annulled, and the last one has been the best relationship of my life for the past 6 years. I'm going to focus on the annulment part. This all happened a few months after I moved back home. I had been living in Tennessee and convinced my ex-fiancée to move back with me. After that relationship ended terribly, she was abusive and I just couldn't take it anymore. I was in a bad place and desperate for someone to care about me. I met this girl online. She said she was 21, and she was fun to talk to. We had similar interests, and we could chat forever. It was a relief to talk to someone who wasn't yelling at me for once. We talked online on the phone, and eventually decided to meet in person. I drove 3 hours to the DFW area to meet her, and when I saw her, she was huge. I'm not thin myself, but wow. It didn't matter, though. I was in such a bad place emotionally after the divorce and the failed engagement that I was willing to make it work. A few months later, I realized the relationship wasn't going anywhere. We had a few stupid arguments, and based on my past relationships, I knew things would only end badly. I should have trusted my gut more. She had been staying with me for the past month and needed to take a trip back home to get some of her things. The plan was for her to move in. After she called to tell me she was home, I told her I wanted to break up. I was done. Then she hit me with, "I'm pregnant." I couldn't believe it. She was on birth control, and I was always adamant about using protection. I couldn't afford a kid. She explained that she'd gone back home to see a trusted doctor for an ultrasound. She even sent me a picture. I was in shock, and suddenly everything I thought I knew about her was out the window. I had something much bigger to deal with now. A few months later, we moved into a bigger house to raise the kid. Somehow, she convinced me to let her friend and her friend's teenage boyfriend live with us. Oh, and their 2 dogs. I didn't get along with her friend at all, but we had the space, and I figured some help with the kid would be useful. Her friend came from a well-off family, and she offered to pay rent, so it seemed to work out. Except it didn't. Her friend was a nightmare. She was constantly complaining and putting me down, saying I should be ashamed of being the father of my child. Day after day, the negativity just kept piling on. Meanwhile, I was the only one working, and my income was stretched thin. We had 4 dogs, 2 of which were mine, for people, and one of them was pregnant. We were close to getting our power shut off a few times, and there were many nights I went without dinner. Throughout all of this, the woman I was with refused to let me go to her doctor's appointments. She went to her doctor in Dallas, but took her mom with her. I just wanted her and the baby to be healthy, so I didn't argue about it. I did what I could to make her happy. We decided to get married, but she didn't want a simple courthouse wedding. No, she wanted a big wedding with all our friends and family. I have no idea how I managed to pay for it all, but I did. Even the dress, which went on a David's bridal credit card. So, we got married and continued living with her friend and all the animals. With no money, of course. Her friend finally decided to help out and lent us some money for a honeymoon to San Antonio. I found a decent hotel on the Riverwalk, but it wasn't good enough for my new wife. She couldn't stop complaining, making the entire trip miserable. Some activities she refused to do, worried it would harm the babies. Yes, babies. She showed me another ultrasound, twins. 2 baby boys, Jacob and Abel. A few months later, I just couldn't take it anymore. Her friend, her boyfriend, and her constant negativity were too much. Every conversation turned into an argument. The house was a mess, and I was working tirelessly to pay the bills, with no appreciation from her. She was spending money on nonsense. So I called it off. She was visiting her mom, who had moved into our old house, and I told her I was done. I went to my parents' house to wait for it all to wind down. But it didn't wind down. Not even half an hour later, she came barreling down the driveway in my other car. She didn't have a license, and I have no idea how she didn't get pulled over. She stormed into the house, crying and begging me to stay, saying she would change. I didn't want to hear it. I got in my car and drove home. On the way there, my parents called. She'd followed me and crashed into another car while driving like a maniac. The crash injured a woman my mom knew and totaled both cars. During all of this, my wife's water broke. Thankfully, she wasn't hurt. I adjusted my route and went to the hospital. It took an hour for them to bring her in, and I was far from happy. My parents and her parents arrived, and we all went to the waiting room. Eventually, a nurse came out and told me I could see her. She was crying, saying, "No matter what happens, don't leave me." I told her I'd think about it. While the nurse was performing an ultrasound, she was having trouble finding the baby's heartbeats. She only heard one faint heartbeat, not two. She called the doctor in. I was terrified. The doctor came in, did her thing, and said, "You're not pregnant. You've never been pregnant." I stood up, calmly walked out of the building, got in my car, and went home. When I got there, I found out that my wife had left her keys inside when visiting her mom, so she had broken the back window to get in and take the keys to my other car. I called my dad to let him know, and we taped the window up. A year of my life was gone. All I had to show for it was emotional scars, an empty bank account, and tons of debt. But oddly, I felt relief. There were no more chains holding me down. I could breathe again. I cried, but not out of sadness, out of joy. The worst part of my life was finally over. It turned out she had lied about being pregnant the whole time. The babies were just a way to keep me with her. I should have seen it coming, but I was too depressed to notice. Any time I had alone was a blessing, but it was always cut short by arguments, her friend's attitude, or dealing with the dogs. In the end, the only person I can truly blame is myself. After all of that, you'd think I'd resent her. I don't, though. I understand why she did what she did. She wasn't the best-looking girl, and she finally had someone who cared about her. She didn't want to lose that. I can relate to that feeling. I forgave her a long time ago. Will I ever forget what she did? No, but I understand why she did it, and I've forgiven her for it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.